She seems to be having fun, right? Good for her. The coup's happening behind her. She had no clue. This was like super viral back like last year, early last year. That's the coup happening behind her. They're going there to now arrest government officials, shut down the legislature, and do the coup. That's what they're doing right behind her. This person accidentally documented like one of the most important moments in her country's history, and she's just there jamming. Just jamming. We haven't talked about Myanmar much lately, but there was something that happened in Myanmar that needs recognition, and that is, oh, wrong article, sorry.
Occurred.
That the United Nations is calling for an investigation after there was a massacre where there was a caravan of cars going down the road in Myanmar, and the military stopped that caravan of cars and massacred over 30 people. Shot them, stabbed them, then burnt all the cars and all of their bodies. I've seen the photographs of the corpses. Actually, let me just look at this off stream to make sure there's no pictures of it. It was fucking horrific. I'll describe it for a moment. What you see is their bodies are so charred, so burnt, that you just don't see skin. You don't see organs. All you see is ash.
Occurred.
With bones on top of it. With the bones sticking out, like their rib cage sticking out of like a pile of ash. Like that's how bad, like, they erased everything. And among the over 30 people that the Myanmar fascist military junta killed were 2 people, part of a non-governmental organization. And that was 2 people from Save the Children. So, I guess we know the Myanmar military junta's position on Save the Children. Oh, and also, this is the same government, by the way, that Michael Flynn said that we should have a coup in this style, okay? So when Michael Flynn said we should have a military coup, you know, Trump's former national security advisor, this is the type of military coup he was endorsing in those comments. He did later walk it back after a ton of outrage, but just throwing that out there, okay? And this military coup also started off of the basis of bogus claims of election fraud, providing no evidence to international monitors before overthrowing the government. Oh yes, and the guy who brought it up called it Myanmar. Yeah, exactly. Let's read this article quick before watching the video about it. United Nations is calling for an investigation following reports that at least 35 people, including a child, were killed in a massacre by Myanmar's military on Christmas Eve. 2 workers for Save the Children, a humanitarian organization, were among those killed, the London-based organization said Tuesday. Photos of the charred remains of the victims' torched villages circulated on social media in Myanmar, where activists say more than 1,300 people have died. That's the thing, right? Just like Afghanistan. Once it's out of the national news headlines, everybody just forgets about it. But people in these countries still have to, like, follow up. They still have to deal with this reality. 1,300 people killed since the coup. Not even 1 year ago. It hasn't even been a year since the coup happened. It happened in February of last year. It's still January now. Beginning of January. And already 1,300 dead. And that's just the ones that can be documented. If you get into some of the indigenous communities that the Myanmar military junta has historically slaughtered, or if you want to include the ethnic cleansing that the military did of the Muslim population of Myanmar, if you want to include those, if you want to include the torture victims, if you want to include those unrightfully detained, if you want to include those injured and maimed and disabled permanently, if you want to include those who had those human rights violated, if you want to include those who had the freedom of speech violated, the list is tremendous, okay? Because a lot of times when people document this, they just talk about those killed in a certain time frame. They don't expand it to include all of the victims of this military. And this is the same military that ethnically cleansed Muslims from the country and expelled thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from the country. And now hundreds of thousands of more refugees, I have a separate article about that, I don't know if we're going to have enough time to get into it, have been produced from a new wave of violence that the military has conducted and is conducting right now as we speak. And the rest of the world has just fucking forgot about it. People have died amid unrest since the military seized power on February 1st and ousted the country's civilian leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. I condemn this grievous incident and all attacks against civilians throughout the country, which are prohibited under international humanitarian law, UN Humanitarian Affairs Chief Martin Griffiths said in a statement on Sunday. He called for a thorough and transparent investigation into the incident so that perpetrators could be swiftly brought to justice, at a time when millions of people in Myanmar remain in dire need of humanitarian support. The U.S. Embassy in Myanmar, in a statement on Sunday, called the killings a barbaric attack and said it would continue to press for accountability for the perpetrators of the ongoing campaign of violence against the people. In Friday's attack, security forces reportedly rounded up civilians in Moso, a village, the eastern state of Kaya. I don't know how to pronounce this, I'm sorry. Where people have been displaced by military offenses and clashes with armed groups. We're going to talk about these clashes with armed groups in a second. I have a lot of stuff I want to talk about when it comes to these armed groups. A villager who visited the scene told the Associated Press that the occupants of 3 vehicles had been arrested, shot, and burned in the vehicles. They had been en route to the camp for internally displaced people. So they were headed for a refugee camp. You know, the center of all rebellion is the most vulnerable population in the western part of the nearby township. Save the Children said the military had attacked a car carrying 2 workers for the organization. They were initially reported missing. 2 of our staff were on the way back to the office after conducting humanitarian response work in a nearby community. Were caught up in the incident. We have confirmation that their private vehicle was attacked and burned out. The military reportedly forced people from their cars, arrested some, killed others, and then burned their bodies, almost like they had something to hide. The aid agency, which placed an early death toll at 38, said it was horrified of the violence and carried against our civilians and our staff. It said its own investigation on the way. The 2 staff members were aged 32 and 28. Their names have been withheld for security reasons. But they were said by Save the Children that both of the people killed had recently become fathers, meaning that both of the people who were killed here, the members of the non-governmental organization Save the Children, recently had children. And so now their children no longer have a father. And of course, the government of Myanmar has yet to respond. Anyway, that's enough of this article, because I want to move on for a second. So, what I have in front of you is a map. Now, there's a lot of maps where you can see activity like this. I'm just bringing this up because I think this map shows clearly the difference. So, what you see on the left is actually Myanmar usually. And what I mean by Myanmar usually is that Myanmar has a long history of violence against the government, because there's a lot of minority groups in Myanmar that don't feel represented by the government. They don't feel represented. By the way, for people saying TOS stuff in chat, even though I agree with you when it comes to the junta, we got to be careful when talking about it on Twitch for Twitch terms of service reasons. Okay, so this map on the left is documenting violence from said militias that represent certain minority groups that have been historically persecuted by the government of Myanmar, military, of course. And you can see that the red are townships with at least 1 mine IED incident. So this isn't even just talking about shootings. This is just mine IED incidents. And then the blue is townships without any mine or IED incidents, explosions and such. The yellows dots are state and regional capitals. The green dots is the union capital. Now on the right is actually after the military coup. And all of that red, all that increased red or increases in IED and mine incidents, explosions, bombing attacks. And this isn't even documenting the huge increase of people who have left urban centers to go join rebellions, shootings of police stations and military checkpoints. A lot of military checkpoints are being shot up by rebels. Now, there's a difference between what's happening now and what happens historically. Historically, it was minority populations in the countryside who are rebelling against the Myanmar government due to its historic persecution of them and them not feeling represented by the interests of the state. Now, what the government has done by overthrowing an overwhelmingly popular Aung San Suu Kyi is made the people in the urban centers, which have historically not rebelled, not only protest against the government and do general strikes and civil disobedience efforts and protest and in some cases riot, rightfully so, mind you. I will actively endorse those riots. Fight me. But now many people from urban centers and cities are now leaving the cities, going into the countryside, and picking up arms against the state. Machine guns, bombs, whatever they can get their hands on. I had photographs, and it was from Jake Hanrahan. So if somebody in chat could find it to me quick so I could show it to chat, I would appreciate it. There are even people with 3D printers printing out guns like an assembly line to be used by fighters fighting the government of Myanmar. So not only are they grabbing weapons seized from the government, grabbing bombs and rifles that they use for hunting and such, and rifles they've gotten from historic organizations that have been fighting against the government, but they're now also 3D printing weapons that they're using against the government. I believe I retweeted the weapons at one point, so if you want to find it, it should be on my Twitter. But you can see the difference in red here from the left to the right, and see that a military junta, which took over power because they wanted to talk about, well, we need to enforce law and order, we need to stop all this chaos and lawlessness, right? Has done nothing but through its disgusting actions of slaughtering the population and disregarding the democratic vote of the people. They have done nothing but bring about another age of lawlessness perpetuated by their own soldiers, not only breaking domestic law, even its own laws, but international law as well when it comes to human rights violation and slaughtering over 1,300 people on top of its historic ethnic cleansing. This is, somebody brought it up, this is completely a failure of the military junta. Is this the tweet? Yes, this is the tweet right here. These are some of the 3D guns. This is from Jake Hanrahan. There are claims that these 3D printed guns were made in Myanmar for the purpose of fighting the military junta there. From what I've seen, the source seems legit. These are FGC-9s, the weapon produced in the Popular Front Plastic Defense documentary. I do recommend the Plastic Defense documentary. It's very good. I like Popular Front as well. If you want a good foreign policy podcast, I recommend Popular Front, and I definitely recommend following Jake Hanrahan. But these are some of the weapons that are being produced in Myanmar for the use against the military government. As a pro-gun Democrat, I can say, good job for all those operating these 3D printers. And it just shows the extents that people are going to in the nation of Myanmar to rebel against this brutal dictatorship. Now, I have a short little video I want to show you guys, but one second. I was just linked to something from, this is an interview with a pageant queen joining the rebels. I will watch this after we watch the first video, which is right somewhere. Here it is. Okay. This is basically a report on everything. They've blurred out all the violence, so we will not be able to see any of the violence here, thankfully. Watch this quick.
It's been more than 10 months since Myanmar's military seized power in a coup. Since then, soldiers have fought with urban protesters and rural militias using violence.
Also, can I just say, I actually got some pushback for something I said, and I'm going to say it again, and if I get banned, whatever, it's probably like a good reason to be banned. I'm not gonna say it. I'm gonna say it just this way, okay? I'll take this one on the chin. I wish every single person in the woods training, getting these 3D printed guns, and getting ready to go deal with military checkpoints in their country, which they inherited from their ancestors and their people and their fathers and their mothers. Good aim. I hope they have a steady hand. I hope they don't shake when the time comes. And they got good aim and their eyes on target. I'll take that one on the chin.
Activists call brutal. They accuse the military of killing more than 1,300 people and detaining more than 11,000. And today, the United Nations called for an investigation into a new massacre that...
Dude, and like, there's so many dynamics here we don't even talk about. Like, the 11,000 people detained, people being cramped into prisons. I remember early on during this, I saw reports of people, like, not only, they'll have like midnight raids where the military will go out to anybody criticizing the government and they'll just take them away in the middle of the night. And so people would not only protest in the middle of the night by banging pots and pans, but there would be like scouts, people who would see the military coming, and then they would go bang on doors, military, military, military. And people would go out there and hide everybody that they could possibly want to detain and make everybody aware before the government comes in and detains them. Like, neighbor defending neighbor, man. I mean, and not only the shutting down of workplaces to make sure that they don't support them. One of the good things, okay, I'm sorry I'm getting all over the place, but this is something I haven't talked about in a while and I have so much to talk about. One of the things I can say that Biden was really good when it came to foreign policy was his sanctioning of the Myanmar military. So you want to hear about a good use of sanctions? I think sanctions can be a very dangerous thing, but the people of Myanmar were actively requesting for the military to be sanctioned, and specifically military companies. A lot of you don't know this, but the military in Myanmar has military companies that sells things like soda, and they have sodas that they sell in Japan and all over the world, right? And those profits directly go to benefit the military. Joe Biden sanctioned those companies, saying we're not going to do business with those companies and we're going to sanction those companies. It's one of the first things Biden did from a foreign policy standpoint, and it was super, super based. And I'm really happy he did that.
The U.S.
Yeah, you guys don't know about this? Look, Myanmar, I'm sorry I have terrible spelling. Myanmar military company soda. Here it is. Drink giant Kirin cuts ties with Myanmar military after coup. Human Rights Watch. Nearly 1 week after the Myanmar military seized control of the government, it's facing a long overdue consequence. On February 5th, Japanese beverage giant Kirin Holdings Company announced that it would terminate its partnership with Myanmar Economic Holdings Public Company, the country's military-owned conglomerate. Kirin described the military's recent action against the company's standards human rights policy, said it would be taking steps as a matter of urgency to put this termination into effect. Kirin has been widely criticized for owning 2 joint ventures with the MEHL, even after the military carried out a campaign of ethnic cleansing against Rohingya Muslim minority population in 2017, killing thousands and forcing 750,000 to flee to neighboring Bangladesh. Anyway, yeah, so stuff like this happening is super, 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 super based.
Described as barbaric. Nick Schifrin reports.
In eastern Myanmar, a line of cars was trying to escape nearby violence, but soldiers torched the vehicles and burned the 35 people who were hoping to flee, possibly including 2 staff of Save the Children. Other photographs of the Christmas Eve massacre, too horrific to show.
So again, I'll describe it one more time. The photos I saw were their bodies were so burnt up that you didn't even see skin or any organs. What you saw were just skulls, the eyes of skulls and the mouths of skulls peeking out of like a pile of ash, and their ribs peeking out from these large piles of ash just stacked next to each other. These bones being mixed up to a point where you're like, you don't know if this pile of bones belong to this person or this pile of bones belongs to this person, which also makes it impossible to identify these bodies, I think. Well, I'm not an expert, I can't say that, but I gotta say it does make it probably a lot more difficult to identify the bodies too, which might be the purpose, so that, like, you know, you don't piss off the family. Who knows? Captain Gwendolyn, thank you so much for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs.
Second time in 4 weeks, soldiers are accused of burning their enemies' bodies. The junta that re-seized power in February has ruled through horror and fear. It's helped spark an exodus. On Christmas Day, families in the southeast saved only what they could carry and fled to neighboring Thailand. Thousands have become refugees to escape military air power, even if they had to walk across rivers. Myanmar's military ruled the country for half a century before civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi came to power in 2015. Her national...
Now, can I just bring something up quick?
A curd is a curd.
The military always held a lot of power in the government. And let me just say, they weren't about to lose a ton of power in the government either. The military, constitutionally, the Constitution is framed specifically because Aung San Suu Kyi did like a civil rights struggle. People don't understand how Aung San Suu Kyi has a got medals from the international stage and stuff. She got it from her civil rights struggle against the military government, which she did for years, and she was detained for years. But the government was set up where by default the military got 25% of the legislative seats, and by default got certain cabinet positions, and by default got a bunch of other stuff. And you want to know how much of the vote you need in order to change the Constitution, to like change all that stuff, because obviously that's disgusting and abhorrent? You need 75% of the vote of the legislature. But if the military automatically gets 25% of the vote, and there's also a few military-aligned political parties, even if you were to get 60 or even hell 70% of the legislators to vote in favor of legislation to change the Constitution, wouldn't be able to do it. That's the deal they had. By default, the military already had it good. What they didn't like is that they kept losing elections to Aung San Suu Kyi, because in Myanmar, Aung San Suu Kyi is overwhelmingly popular due to her long-standing civil rights struggle against the military. And you can see that because once they took over, what did all the people of Myanmar do? They went on general strikes. Doctors said they would not treat the military, but they would treat civilians for free. The people in urban centers started fleeing into the woods to join the struggle. 3D printed guns started getting printed. Protests spiked. And how did the military respond? By massacring people. I wonder why they're not very popular. Anyway, what I'm saying here is that the military already had it good in this government. But they just couldn't stand the fact that they kept losing elections and their military-aligned political parties were not popular, maybe because they were aligned with the military. And so, the military then thought up a bunch of bogus claims about election fraud. Wherever you heard that before. Not saying it was inspired by that, just, making a note, since, Trump's former national security advisor said we should have something like this in the United States. This would be the result of it, by the way. They then overthrew the government and have been massacring people ever since. Also, this is also another display of how important the internet is into organizing stuff, because we saw that with the Arab Spring and how important the internet was when it comes to civil struggle and resisting against dictatorship. One of the first things that they targeted was independent news in the country, trying to shut it down, and internet outages and trying to shut down Facebook and Twitter and anything that people could use to organize. Because they knew if people organized, they could apply pressure onto the government. Just throwing it out there.
The National League of Democracy Party easily won the 2020 election. But on February the 1st, when the new parliament was supposed to sit, General Aung declared a state of emergency and arrested Suu Kyi and hundreds of pro-democracy activists. Earlier.
Oh, and also, do you guys remember that video? And when I say, the video, I'm talking about, Myanmar dance. This video. So, this is a video where this is just a random, dance instructor just doing her thing. She's vibing, she's dancing. She seems to be having fun, right? Good for her. The coup's happening behind her. She had no clue. This was, super viral back, early last year. That's the coup happening behind her. They're going there to now arrest government officials, shut down the legislature, and do the coup. That's what they're doing right behind her. This person accidentally documented, one of the most important moments in her country's history, and she's just there jamming. Just jamming. Anyway, let's go back to the video.
This month, Suu Kyi was sentenced to 2 years in prison. That day, protesters took to the streets in Myanmar's capital, continuing their resistance to military rule. All year, they have demonstrated. A massive civil disobedience movement has paralyzed basic services. In response, the military has turned urban streets into battlegrounds. But the resistance extends to the country.
Look, I don't want to tell you guys to go looking for these videos, but there's like videos of just people just straight up like, down with the government, da, 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 and they're just chanting, and then you just see just their brains get splattered against the wall because there's like snipers out there just taking them out. Like that's how this government rolls. They're so when you hear my earlier statements, right? You need to understand that's what the government is doing to their people right now. They are just literally through brute force saying, get back down, because they know they're unpopular, and the only way they can hold on to power is if they murder enough people to scare them into submission.
Countryside, where ethnic militias attack army checkpoints. For decades, ethnic minorities.
America is fascist, though? Okay, can I just say this for a second? Don't have main character syndrome, okay? Not everything in the world has to be about the United States or America, okay? Or Americans, or what you think of America. When I'm talking about this right now, I brought up America in one instance, and that was Joe Biden's response to this. That's it, okay? Look, so I just want to throw this out there, okay? The West, it was sarcasm. Dude, the internet's terrible for detecting sarcasm, but I'm going to keep going because I have heard some people talk about this. When something like this happens, your first response shouldn't be, man, you know? But America's fascist. I brought it up in two instances. One, Joe Biden's response to this. Two, Michael Flynn's endorsement of this. We don't need to, like, you know, bring it all in, you know? Where we're like, but you know how terrible this is? But anyway, let me tell you how fascist America. We don't need to do that. If there is something that is directly correlative, like Joe Biden's response or somebody talking about this in the States, then bring it up. But I feel like a lot of people in the West just feel like they're the main characters in this video game. So everything that happens in the world needs to be about them, you know?
Have fought what they consider central authorities' political persecution.
To be clear, the footage you're seeing right now is militia members literally shooting at government checkpoints.
Its ethnic minorities have fought what they consider central authorities' political persecution. Myanmar has about 20 ethnic armed groups in yellow that control about a third of the country's territory. The Christmas Eve attack took place in Kaya State, where the Karenni ethnic army has been fighting the military on and off for years. But since the coup, urban civilians have teamed up with ethnic militias, united to resist military rule.
Everyone came here with their resentment and revolutionary spirit, so that is why they can only focus on fighting for revolution.
To understand how critical this moment is for Myanmar, I'm joined by Priscilla Clapp, previously Chief of Mission in Myanmar and is now Senior Advisor to the U.S. Institute of Peace, which was established by Congress. Priscilla Clapp, welcome back to the NewsHour. This attack was brutal, but we have seen other attacks just as brutal over the last few months from the military. Why?
The better part of a year, in fact, many months. They have run into very, very serious popular opposition in the country that they did not expect when they took over in a coup.
That's the thing, right? The military has had a hold on power generally for so long, even through, like I talked about earlier, civilian rule. They knew they were unpopular. The election results showed that, but I think they just thought historically, since the people, like a lot of people alive today, remember what it was like when the military ruled. They could just take you over or just take you away in the middle of the night. They didn't realize that since then, a whole new generation of people had been born who that you know, don't want military rule, that they grew up without the military necessarily doing that. There's people in their like 18, 19, 20 who don't want to return to that time that their parents had to go through, right? They don't want that age. Not to mention, there's people who remember the military coup and probably never want to return to that time ever again, and now have been forced back into it and are not wanting to accept that because they got that taste of freedom. Even if it wasn't complete freedom, because the military had some hold of it. Even if there's still a ton of problems in the society of Myanmar. A ton. Obviously, much of them, by the way, rooting from the military. Like if we point to the ethnic cleansing and the genocide that the military did against the Rohingya Muslim population, where was that problem from? The military. They wanted to do it, so they did it, right? They don't want to return to it. And I think they just thought that that lingering fear would be enough to keep people down, and it's not succeeding. Oh my goodness. While I was watching this, I think they didn't remove it while I was watching it, did they? Okay, no, they added they added an inappropriate for some viewers while I was watching. Okay.
In the cities, we've also got ethnic militias, so-called unprecedented is that
for its life now and last year. The original, they have run into very, very serious popular opposition in the country that they did not expect when they took over in a coup on February 1 this past year. The original demonstrations against the coup makers have turned into violent opposition.
By the way, can I just say, now this is actually a great example of like main character syndrome in action when it comes to some people in the West. I remember there were some people, I think it was a Ben Norton, or I think it's Ken Norton, I forget his name. He's some like dingle fuck from Gray Zone, right? Dingle fuck, that's hell of an insult. And him, like, I remember him like calling, like saying that the stuff that was going on in Myanmar was like the sign of like a color revolution, which is basically to say, Ben Norton, that's it, a color revolution, and ooh, maybe it was all fake and backed by the West. And since the West said, you know, killing civilians that are protesting bad, that's all he needed to kind of just single towards this. And it's another example of main character syndrome, not realizing or knowing the history of Myanmar and its military dictatorship, and therefore doing a kind of twisted form of historiography to try to make it fit into a wider, just like, I don't like America and I'm going to make every conversation about that narrative, right? Because a lot of people don't know, and I'll bring it up here, okay? If you want to talk about Myanmar's military and its political influence, it has a ton. In many instances, political leaders would meet with the leadership of the military before they would meet with the leadership of the country, Aung San Suu Kyi, right? They would meet with them, then her. And so showing that international leaders recognize the amount of influence the military had. And the Chinese government has supplied the government of Myanmar with military arms, bullets, guns, and munitions that it then went and used to do ethnic cleansing. And then the Chinese government went on the international stage and defended the Myanmar government. And while they're upset about the amount of chaos that's going on right now, they're still willing to stand by the Myanmar government at the moment. He made an entire thread calling the protests fake. Did he really? After attacking and burning down numerous Chinese businesses, the Western media favored so-called peaceful pro-democracy protesters in Myanmar and now China gas pipeline will be burned. Extremely totally normal, organic protest chant. Okay, so Benjamin Norton is a fucking moron, okay? Somebody who's willing to let children just get shot in the street, and his main issue is just saying CIA did it. His last issue is actually civilians getting killed, raped, shot, in prison. His main issue is, how do I make this about America being bad? As if you can't talk about a million other issues to make America look bad on the international stage. What a muppet? Exactly. The thing is here, the reason why these people fucking don't like the Chinese government is because they're giving the guns to the government of Myanmar, which they then use to shoot people. You know, if somebody gave someone a knife and they then stabbed me, I wouldn't like the guy who gave me the knife. If that government is willing to recognize a military coup that just went against its democratically elected government and give them legitimacy on the international stage, like the Chinese government did and many other governments in the Asian Pacific sphere, China's not the only one that did it, they're not gonna like them. And you wanna know when? And he brings it kind of up here, but he twists it. The only time China really gave a fuck about these protests, the only time they said anything about these protests was when its own businesses were burnt down. That's your communist revolution. They don't give a fuck that people are getting slaughtered. They don't give a fuck that children are being burnt to death. They don't give a fuck that people are being raped. They don't care about the ethnic cleansing of 750,000 Muslims. I mean, why would the Chinese government care? They have a historically wonderful relationship with its Muslim community in the monitoring of people in Xinjiang. We don't even need to get that right now. They don't give a fuck about any of that. The only time they care is when one of its businesses get burnt down. Glory to the People's Republic of China. Truly a communist wonderland. Jesus fucking Christ. Ben Norton, what a fucking moron.
And so the military is fighting for its life now, and particularly attacking areas of the country where the resistance is the strongest. And the area that they attacked on Christmas Day is one of those.
And so you referred to those original protesters, the civil disobedience movement in the cities. We've also got ethnic militias, so-called People's Defense Forces as well, are expanding. How unprecedented is that widespread resistance? What's the implication of it?
It's quite unprecedented. It has not happened before. When there have been rebellions against military rule, they have been largely urban. They have been in the form of protests, in the street protests. They have not really turned violent. Separately, the army has been fighting ethnic militias and armies for 70 years unsuccessfully. They haven't won any battles against them. In fact, during that time, they have become more organized, better funded, better armed, and stronger control over their territories. So the army is actually in a losing battle overall over time, and they're fighting for their life.
The problem is the military is being sanctioned on its military companies. It's losing its international legitimacy. Its credibility is taking hits on the world stage with these massacres. Now, what used to be a center of how you could say relative stability in city centers are now being shut down by mass disobedience protests, and many of them are going into the woods to join in arms with many of the ethnic militias, which has historical experience fighting the government in Myanmar. They're being trained and working with these ethnic militias who know how to do this. They're 3D printing guns. They're going on strike. They're not. Many people are not servicing military members. They are being put under such tremendous pressure, and they're so tremendously unpopular that, yeah, it's not a surprise that they're not able to take back many of the how you say the backwoods of the country. In fact, I saw one report, and I would need to go back and check this, but I think I saw one report that said like that if you were to look at it like a map on where they had the control or like influence, like the same way we kind of did in Afghanistan, that the rebels, the quote unquote rebels being a very broad term, okay, control like 1/3 of the country. When you, of course, none of it's like city centers or stuff. But hey, as an American, we have a lot of history of hearing stats like that in reference to Afghanistan. And how did that turn out?
And so we've seen, as
I'm not making a fatalistic determination here. I'm just saying that the military is losing ground.
Said these ethnic militias confronting the army, fighting the army, even grabbing a little bit of self-governance in their territories. But could this go further than self-governance? Is the very state at risk of fracture?
I believe it is. That's a debatable point, but it is going in that direction. There's no question. The area along the China border where there are some very strong armies and militias, and on the west along the Bangladesh border, the Arakan army, which has taken over the Rakhine state, which used to be called Arakan, is very strong, and they've basically beaten the military at their own game there, and they have virtual control over most.
Oh, sorry. I should have also brought this up. The ties aren't as deep as in with China, but I believe the Russians have also sold weapons to the military of Myanmar recently too. I'd have to go back. Let me check that while this woman talks.
Most of that state. The military doesn't dare to attack either of those areas because they know they would lose.
As the military struggles with those fights that you just identified, what is the morale inside the military? Many soldiers are being asked to fight where it's very cold. There's some trench warfare, and there's attempts to actually get soldiers to defect. So what's the morale inside the military?
At the lower levels, the military is suffering from very bad morale. The people that are on the front lines fighting are losing. They're losing a lot of people.
Okay, I've confirmed it. Yeah, that didn't take long at all. There's a lot of articles here. One from Reuters. Russia working closely with post-coup Myanmar on military supplies exporter. Another one here. Russia focuses on arms sales to like-minded generals in Myanmar. Yeah, holy shit. That's from The Diplomat.
people. They're getting killed themselves, and there are many defections. And the defectors are going off into the People's Defense Forces and fighting back against the military and helping the People's Defense Forces learn how to fight. They're arming them with their weapons and so forth. So it's becoming a real civil war.
What do you think the United States government should do? There are experts I talk to who say squeeze the military sources of revenues more, that's oil and gas, pressure the UN to support the opposition group, the National Unity Government, even declare what the military did against the Rohingya a genocide. Do you think those steps could help?
All of those steps are good steps, but there are more as well. And the U.S. government will be coming up with a new strategy soon at the request of the Congress. So
the thing is, the two things that I saw, and sorry for background noise, that's my heater. It's broken. There's two major things that I saw. Of course, was the sanction on the military companies, which any sanctions on medical supplies, stuff like that, never. Don't even imagine touching that. Or food. But military supplies, tightening the entrance of military supplies into Myanmar, that's one thing I would, of course, support. And the other thing, which I, of course, supported, is a sanction on all military companies. Because that's how the military makes a lot of its money, is through its military-backed companies going out there and making deals with, for example, the Japanese beverage company that we were talking about earlier. I think it was specifically beer. So that's just two things that I would definitely be supportive of. The first thing is kind of semi-done. The second thing is kind of difficult because, China and Russia support and other countries not being as eager to want to themselves have to put pressure on their own companies not to export to Myanmar. I don't know, man. Beer is essential. You got a good point there.
We will see many more things happening. I think that I believe they are looking very hard at how to cut off some of the revenue from oil and gas and other things. It's not that simple. So we have to be careful. But there are ways of squeezing them. And that is definitely the main thrust of U.S. policy, is just to squeeze the military more and more. I believe that they should be accused of genocide, but I don't think it's just Rohingya. It's not even ethnic cleansing anymore. They're cleansing they're going after all ethnic groups, including their own.
Finally, in the brief time we have left, let me just ask about the humanitarian situation. The UN warns that half of Myanmar's population could fall into poverty. Millions could face hunger. How dire is the humanitarian crisis?
Absolutely dire. In fact, that has already come to pass. I would say that half or more of the population is already facing enormous hunger. But part of the strategy of the opposition is to destroy the economy. They're willing to take this in hand just to bring the army down. And it's very difficult to predict what the end will be, but it's going to go on for quite a long time.
Does anybody have that maid Catboy protester from Myanmar? I remember seeing it a while ago. Maid protester Myanmar. Here it is. Here's one of the protesters in Myanmar. Look how, this is how broad the coalition is. Shoot me with the cum, not with the gun. They have a broad coalition. We must. Look, if there's anything you can convince me to get involved over, okay? We must save them. Invade Myanmar now. Chat fucking freaking out. Okay.
Time, unfortunately, and people will suffer badly.
Okay, now let's watch this video that Fluff threw our way. This is from June of this year.
I miss my family and friends, and I want them to be safe. So stay safe. I'm scared, but I need to fight.
My name is Tatmadaw. I'm 24 years old and I'm a Miss Grand Myanmar. My name is Grace.
Starting February, we all protested peacefully. But they brutally attacked us. So there is only one way left.
Wait, let me just make sure. There's nothing TOS here, right, Fluff?
When I am stay at Tiango, when we see the soldier, we scared. And then nighttime is scary because they are coming to so many people's house, and then they kill them. So many people that die. So I feel really sad. I can't stay like this anymore. So I decided to come. Every day we have a training. We're training for guerrilla warfare. 4 o'clock since morning until 7 or 8. The 6 morning we have to do exercise, and then we have to make it for the teamwork, and then how to hold the gun and then how to shoot the gun. Most of the people are young, and the women also they are here. They saw my photo and then they worried for me, and then they called me, but I didn't contact with them.
The thing is, a lot of people don't know this, but let's say one family member goes out and joins a rebellion or something. One way to discourage people from doing it isn't from directly threatening them, but from threatening their family. This is something that authoritarian governments do all the time, where if one person goes out there and joins a rebellion, then what you need to go is go out and intimidate their family, and then maybe make calls to that person like, hey, if you don't turn yourself in, who knows what's going to happen to dad, right? Who knows what's going to happen to mom? You have no clue. Wait, what did Robe Man say to get him timed out? I know Robe Man. Damn, okay, she a 10. Okay. Let's not talk about how hot the rebel who is putting their life on the line for the country is, okay? I don't know if that's the best way to approach this situation.
I can see that Henley and then Tuza William. I know that they cannot come back to Myanmar right now. I hope Myanmar will get back to democracy in the future. I want to shoot the flame or something like this, and then after that, I have to teach my kids gymnastics and just going travel around the world. So I want to go back to normal life. That's all I need.
Okay. Okay, I think we've covered Myanmar thoroughly for today. Fucking Norton, man. Like, yeah. Christ. Shit's sad, man. Anyway, that's enough of that. Let's move on. Hey, he does look like a thumb person. He does look like a thumb person. I'm posting this.